Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of SBJ Live. I'm Dan Kaufman with Sports Business Journal. Thank you for being here. As you are coming into our webinar room here, I want to make sure that I tell you a little bit about how these SBJ Live episodes are the most successful. And frankly, the way that they're the most successful is with your engagement and your involvement. This is live, so we've got some great speakers on stage here for you. And this will go even better if we have you interacting with them. What does that mean? That means that I want you to take a look at the chat bubble on the right-hand side of your screen. There is a space there where we want you to tell us who you are and what you do. And if you see people who you know who are messaging in that chat, please feel free to message them back. We encourage that here on SBJ Live. And then right next to the chat bubble, there is a questions bubble. These are in the bottom right of my screen. I think if you're joining on a desktop, they should be in the bottom right. If you're joining on mobile, they may be somewhere else, but I think you can probably find them. The questions bubble right next to the chat bubble is where we want you to put your questions for our panelists. David Broughton, who is here, he will be moderating this session, and he has plenty of questions, but we want to make sure that we get your questions as well. Don't wait till the end to put the questions in. Put the questions in as soon as they pop into your head, because the audience members and you can upvote questions that you want to make sure that we get to. So check out the chat tab. I see plenty of people messaging right now. Thank you very much. And check out the questions tab and make sure that you are interacting with us. We will go for about 40 minutes. If we're just rolling along, we've got tons of questions. We might go a little bit longer than that, but expect that we are going to take about 40 minutes of your time, and I'm sure it will be valuable. This is Sports Tourism Growth Opportunities in the U.S. Market, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage Janis Burke. She is the Chief of International Sport and Strategy at the Sports Events and Tourism Association. John David, President and CEO of the Sports Events and Tourism Association. And Amanda Shank, Executive Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at Unrivaled Sports. And your moderator, SBJ's David Broughton. David, over to you.
Thanks, Dan. I will say right off the bat, I'm really excited about this for all the right reasons. I'm a hyper sports traveler. As a lot of you know, I take every opportunity I can to get away and package in as many sporting events and sports related tourism things I can, Hall of Fame, and occasionally I'll find a pub near a ballpark. But one of the biggest reasons I'm excited about this is when we proposed this a few weeks ago, I really thought this audience would be dominated by DMOs, CBB, sports commissions. But I'll tell you what, if you look at the 300 registrants, this is a very diverse crowd, a lot of pro teams, pro leagues, college athletic departments, international visitors here today, folks in the investment world. So this is a really diverse crowd, which to me really speaks to the strength of the strength and the breadth of the sports tourism space. So happy to have Janis, John, and Amanda with us, and we're going to jump right into it. There's a lot of things going on in the sports travel world right now. As we all know, a whole bunch of global events coming to the U.S. over the next decade or so. So, John, I'm going to jump right over to you. Sports tourism generated about $20 billion in federal, state, and local taxes in 2024. You guys have a big annual report that you released a few weeks ago. Can you just give us an overview on really the value of sports tourism and what it's meant to the overall travel world?
Yeah, thanks so much, David. And thanks for the opportunity to share that story. Sports ETA, with our partnership with Tourism Economics, we love to create this great research and data benchmarking to share what's going on in the industry. The report you're referencing was the first time we had gone out and taken that measurement of spectator sports tourism to see what that size and that scope of it is. And to your point, the numbers were phenomenal. And in 2024, according to our research, we illustrated there were 109.7 million spectator sports tourism travelers. And again, what we're looking at are did they have a qualified overnight stay? Were they a qualified travel that came into the destination, which is really key to that. But look, what we're finding in the pandemic proved is that sports tourism is absolutely incredibly, viable. It's incredibly resourceful, and it's incredibly resilient, to communities. And we saw that during the pandemic, and we're seeing that now as we're seeing some of that dip and that softening in international travel. We have this decade of incredible events coming our way, and we're excited to showcase what these opportunities are, particularly in a destination. Sports tourism is diversification. It's quality of life. It's all of these great things that are just beyond bringing that business or group travel into your destination. It's so much more than that. And that's what's being embraced nationwide by destinations all across the country.
You mentioned international travel. That gives me an easy segue over to Janis. Janis, we're not going to shy away from the big question marks going on right now. International travel down double digits. Visitors from Canada in the first 4 months of the year down 20%. This brand USA is going to get proposed getting its funding cut by 80%. A lot of hurdles right now. You've navigated uncertainty before. Now it's your full-time job. What can we start taking away? What can we do to overcome these hurdles?
Yeah, and look, with every administration, there comes strengths and there comes challenges, right? One of the good things that came when the new administration came in is they set up a task force for World Cup, which is going to be mega for the United States, really the Americas, but especially the United States. And so that was a good thing. And there's some movement there. On the downside, there's funding cuts and things like that. There's messaging. I was just in London last week, and a lot of the questions were around, are we going to be welcomed? What's going to be the issues with the visas? And so those are all things that are serious issues for the tourism industry that we're all working through. Even our professional sports teams, right? They feed off of a lot of international travelers that come in that want to experience a Major League Baseball game or an NBA game. And so we want to make sure that we can keep those international travelers coming in, and we're working hard to help support Brand USA. Our membership has deep roots in their communities. John has engaged the members to try to help ensure that we can keep some of that funding.
Amanda, we'll jump over to you. In a couple of weeks, there's a $70 million youth sports complex opening about an hour south of Chicago. Youth construction. We've got a graphic here that we ran a few weeks ago. If Jasmine can pull that up, just to give the folks an idea of the massive scope of youth sports construction. Amanda, one of the things I like most about this complex opening up in a couple of weeks is got a beer garden. I don't understand why every complex in the world doesn't have a beer garden, but nobody's asked me yet. But Unrivaled is everywhere seemingly now. What do you folks look for in a venue? What can you talk about the development that you folks are involved in, and what's the takeaway? What are cities? What do you wish more municipalities or even bidders would think about looking forward, looking in the future?
Sure. Well, thank you. And for anyone who's not familiar with Unrivaled, we operate 15 youth sports venues across the country. We also have more than 15 programming brands that go to destinations throughout the U.S. In baseball and softball, flag football, action sports, soccer, and a few more sports to come. And to David's point, there has been a huge boom in youth sports complex development. I think a lot of that was spurred on from what John was referencing, and youth sports really propped up the travel and hotel industries post-COVID during 2020, and also a really huge resurgence in 2021. And so a lot of communities are evaluating, does it make sense for us to invest in a youth sports complex? I think the most important thing about those developments is that they're family first. They're keeping the ultimate user in mind when you're deciding what to build in your community. And also that they're right-sized. We're seeing a lot of huge numbers in terms of 50 field complexes or, $150 million investments in venues. That's not right for every community. We have complexes like the Ripken Experience Pigeon Forge, which is 6 fields, built on the side of a mountain in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, which is a pretty cool place. But the opportunity to drive real impact through youth sports is right for a lot of different communities throughout the country, not only because there's a economic impact there, but also because there's a legacy and an access point for your local residents.
Yeah, that Pigeon Forge is a great facility. So this is a question for all of you, but mainly jumping on what Amanda said. So what investments need to be made in tech, in venue upgrades, visitor experience? What investments should folks be looking at to get the visitors back, not just as participants, but you get done and say, yeah, we just played 6 games in 4 days, but I'd like to bring the family back here this fall. What investments need to be made to secure that future sports tourism revenue. We'll stick with you, Amanda.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I mean, we're really thinking about how do we bring the magic of sports to as many kids as possible. And a lot of that comes down, as you're saying, David, to the family experience. And so when families plan their vacations, their free time around youth sports tournaments, they're expecting that same seamless, frictionless experience that they do from a professional ballpark. And so, as people are developing complexes or renovating them, obviously first it's safety. There's a lot of playing surfaces across the country that could use a little love. We're bringing them certainly to a few facilities. But then from there, how do you make the family experience stellar? So that's parking, it's close bathrooms, it's play spaces for siblings that are coming on site. And then it's really collaborating with destinations to make sure you can curate that experience in the community too. So what restaurants they should be going to, what attractions they could see. It's really about thinking about how that 4 or 7 day vacation is going to play out for a family, and trying to identify the points of improving each level of that experience.
John, Janis?
Yeah, and to dovetail off of what Amanda said, I mean, that was perfectly articulated. The destinations and rights holders that are executing an event in the right way, I mean, they're building roots, they're planting seeds. I mean, genuinely planting seeds. And when we talk about the future tourism pipeline, we like to say in sports tourism that we're the tip of that spear. When you take a 10-year-old for one of their first national tournaments and they're going to a great town, maybe it's in Pigeon Forge or maybe it's a new complex in Chicago, and they have that world-class experience, but you also get them into the community. You also let them see the great assets, that the city has to offer. That's planting a seed that's going to last a lifetime. One of the great stories I love to tell about myself personally, I raced BMX and motocross in my life, and a really competitive motocross racer. And my favorite racetrack was in Milton, Florida, right outside of Pensacola. We would race there on Saturday nights, and if I had a great race, Dad would take us to the beach on Sunday. I have 3 daughters. I've raised in Arizona. And when we do a beach vacation, do you know where we go? The Panhandle of Florida. Yeah, and that story repeats itself over and over again in sports tourism. So, not only is it enhancing those facilities in and of itself, but it's that exactly what Amanda said, that deep tie to the community and showing these visitors what a great event's all about.
And I think you have to start early, right? You can't just wait until everybody's in town. So I think if destination marketing organizations can work with the rights holder, if the professional sports teams that are in that city or an hour drive from that city can work to understand who's coming into the city and how do we get to them earlier. I think it has to be a strong partnership to get people to come in a day early, stay a day later, or even return back because they were too busy competing and they didn't get to see everything they wanted to see. But that really gets down to marketing. And so many times, on the rights holder side or the destination marketing side, we're just, we're so busy operating the event and we're mean and lean a lot of times that we're not thinking strategically, how do we capture those dollars in a better way?
And that's always been my question too, is I when I go to an event as a parent or just on my own or just with some friends, I don't see the effort being made to say, let's go to here's your package deal, right? Why isn't a pro team or a DMO saying, here's your package, come to my town and you can do this, and this, eat here, and here, go to a Hall of Fame and maybe jump in the fountain at 2 a.m. This is what I want as a package deal, and I feel we're missing. But you folks saw the poll on the side that asked you what markets make you feel when you go there. From the minute you land, the minute you drive in the town, you see the sign "Welcome to wherever." What makes you feel like you're in that market? I'm just we're kind of curious what the response is. So that poll is open. So please jump, and then we'll look back at the results in a few minutes. So I'm going to stick with that.
And David, I'd like to just throw out kind of a challenge to our DMOs, really. We're all revenue driven with membership. Of course, our members pay to get certain benefits, but sometimes that small community restaurant that everybody goes to, the locals go to, that's really cool, maybe isn't a member, right? So how do you involve them so the visitor still experiences the whole of your destination, even if they might not be a member?
That's a question. I mean, how do you continue to generate revenue? How do you, what can people take away from this 40-minute conversation? Just knocking on doors, right? I mean, how do you get more marketing? How do you get more tourism dollars into your town? It's a pretty big question.
Yeah, I think from the
Or
rights
maybe
holder
you
side.
need to
Sorry, go ahead,
rethink
Jane.
membership. No, go ahead, Amanda. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, from the rights holder side, I think it's when we look at destination partners, and John does a lot to educate the membership of Sports CTA about this. It's about collaboration and sort of what juice they've generated in their own community. So when we're looking at a destination, do they have solid relationships with their hoteliers so that when we're in early planning, they're participating in those booking platforms? You know, do they know the restaurants that can cater to a group of 40, baseball players and their parents? And one example comes to mind in Cooperstown, New York. We pin trade at Cooperstown All-Star Village. That's probably the biggest attraction outside of our new event, which is the Mom's Home Run Derby, which is crushing. But the local restaurants have started to pin trade. So there's like special commemorative pins of the pizza place down the street. And I think all of that really just comes from the destination understanding the rights holders event, their audience, and starting that collaboration really early. When our guests are planning, unlike some leisure travelers, you register for Cooperstown at least a year out, sometimes longer. And so that gives the destination a lot of time to plan about how do we really curate the best experience so that from the moment they enter Oneonta, they know that this is a place where they're welcome. The community is excited to have them there. They see, representation of Cooperstown All-Star Village all over that town. And they feel like it's someplace that they want to come back to year over year.
Janis?
Yeah, no, I think Amanda's, right on. I think we have to, as a community, whatever your role is in that community, you have to be aware of what visitors are coming in. Whether you're on the convention side or sports side, or in this case, we're talking sports, but those family experiences last for a lifetime. You remember as a kid when you're competing and you're in that city and how you felt and how you were welcomed into that community. And so I think that it's really important for communities to work closer together versus in silos.
What's the follow-up from especially Amanda, with the families that are going to Cooperstown or Pigeon Forge or wherever? There's follow-up from you folks saying, hey, here's our next tournament, or here's our next our roster of tournaments. But is there a collaboration with Cooperstown or Pigeon Forge? Do they then reach out? Is there sharing of information? How do you get those families to come back when it's not a tournament?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we do with our destination partners is give them insight into our NPS scores and our survey feedback. So when we have visitors come to any event, whether it's flag or baseball or softball or soccer, we're asking them what was the driver of their experience. Would they recommend this to other people on a team or in an organization? And we're always looking to share that data into the community. So we have, I won't name names, so we had a hotel partner at one point who was getting consistently bad feedback on the survey. And, it's in our best interest to also share all of that data with our destination partner so that they can help fix it on their side too. And we've been able to make that sort of a constant communication, given that we're running events essentially year round. There's always dialogue. There's always opportunity to improve on where we're steering our guests to once they're in the community.
John?
Yeah, I think
information sharing.
Yeah, Amanda brought up some great points in terms of the data. I think that's where the industry has really started, a transformation, if you will, in one, better data collection, but more importantly, data transfer, from the rights holder to the destination, and that great communication. We work with our rights holders all the time to share with them, hey, what does your post-event reporting look like? It needs to be robust. You need to, not only justify the investment the destination made in your event, but also to get tactical share that type of post-survey results, share some of that research that's been done, so that everybody can improve that experience. And what you find all the time with great partnerships is they'll look at the data and they'll work towards points of improvement. And as an event owner too, you find holes in your own systems. And I think David, you brought up an excellent point. When it comes into, hey, coming to a professional or something of that nature, having a great package that takes me through it. And Janis and I, at a trade show yesterday, this is something we were talking about. So you're hearing a lot of different feedback, and I really do believe that you're seeing both destination event owners. You're seeing it, in the major league sports, that people are stepping up and really working to enhance that user experience, through data capture and so forth, and great information sharing.
So I'll ask a quick question, then we'll go to the. There's a couple questions in the question app here. So you mentioned the trade show, and I know every team, every league is trying to be more global, even with the challenges right now, or because of the challenges right now. But how do the DMOs forge a strong relationship? I know I kind of asked that earlier, but there are so many pro teams and pro leagues that just might not even think about it. I know I kind of touched on it earlier, but I know there's not one answer. But how do you forge that strong relationship? How do you start that relationship?
David, it's a great question. And I mean, I think that, one of the things that's happening too, and we've seen this, recently, in various areas where in some cases, people are looking at legislation, looking at tourism is not being essential, that it's an either or type situation, which obviously we could, we would say that nothing could be further from the truth. The return on investment is phenomenal in sports tourism. And we're seeing a lot of our destinations, they're stepping in to say, hey, we need to be great active partners with all the players in our community. And I'll give you a great example here in Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm based. I came in with our friends from Visit Phoenix. We did this great session at Chase Field, for the local stakeholders, and shared the power of sports tourism. We certainly talked about on the professional level, which those constituents know, but we also shared youth and amateur as well. And hey, how do we collaborate these together? How do we do great things together, tell that entire story, and show that greater impact? And we're seeing destinations across the country lean in, on their partners within, their destination members, and looking at them as a true asset. And it's paying off. And we're seeing those dividends occur right now today.
You said two words that I definitely want to follow up on here. You said talk about investment in partners. We've got a question from the audience. Pete Last says, the emotional and financial power of youth sports is undeniable. Do you all think brands and sponsors see this the same way? And I'll kind of pick on to that is like, why aren't there more sponsorships and marketing? That Crosstown product I mentioned earlier, Pepsi, Coors Light, Wick Trust, big regional Chevrolet. I mean, there's like $2.5 million of sponsorship already just for that youth sports venue. Why aren't there more? And I'll start with you, Amanda.
Sure. I mean, I think to the question, brands are increasingly understanding the value of youth sports. There's probably been a hold up in terms of really putting investment there, just because it feels really hard, I think, for a lot of marketing agencies to get their arms around. It's a huge space. There's thousands of events every year. There's all of these different venues. It's not as easy as saying, I'm going to go put my activation dollars towards this one venue or this one league. It's much more complicated to access. But that being said, as groups like ours, for example, continue to scale, we start to provide a solution where you really can access all of those families in one place. I would also say that there are brands that are sort of first movers. An example is I was just in Canton, Ohio this weekend. Unrivaled Flag hosted a first of its kind girls high school nationals flag tournament. And that was brought to us by Under Armour. Under Armour's been an amazing partner for us on the baseball side for a long time. And they said flag football is important to us, but especially girls. And so when we brought to them this concept of a high school girls championship, they wanted to be involved. They wanted to invest in it. They put dollars and product behind it. They outfitted every team that came, including 8 invitational teams that were sort of the best high school girls flag football programs in the country. And it was a really fun event. You know, it's not the biggest event that Under Armour will invest in this year, but I think they were really happy with the impact that it had on those teams and those families. And it's something that will help continue to grow the sport of flag football for girls specifically. So, I think there's early mover brands like them that are getting involved, but there's certainly an opportunity and a big one for others to get involved.
John, challenges that you've seen, from BMX or all the way up to now, as far as getting, like Amanda said, there's so many events, so many cities, so many tiers. Any progress made that you see?
Well, look, Amanda said the key word. When you're a great brand and you're looking at sponsorship, it's scale. Oftentimes you're looking at, is there an organization out there that I can scale, this type of promotion through? And really, in a lot of cases, there hasn't been. It was more targeted, more niche, and so forth. What we are seeing, though, is with organizations like Unrivaled that they're painting with such a wide brush across multiple disciplines and with so many participants, that opportunity is growing. And then you're also seeing stuff where you're seeing, certain brands and sponsors looking at hyperlocal, and seeing a great facility potential, that they see the bandwidth of the facility, they see the throughput. Like, you know what, we want in on that. We want to be a part of that. So it's starting to come, David. It's a great question by Peter, and I think we'll see a lot of growth in that area.
Janis, I'm going to go back to the international. I thought somebody said something.
Let me just talk about, David, if you don't mind, talk about the sponsorship side internationally. I was in London a couple of weeks ago and talking to some of the big organizations that are supporting FIFA. They understand, okay, I'm connected with FIFA and I can get to the 10 host cities. But how do we get to all of the other cities? Because no international traveler is coming into the United States for 2 or 3 weeks and just spending their entire time in one city. They're going to map out their course. And there's a lot of non-host cities. If you look at Las Vegas, Chicago, or you look at how close New Orleans is to Houston that has 7 matches, whatever it is, there's a lot of cities that have the ability to feed off of this giant event that's coming next summer. But the sponsors are also looking for ways, how do I connect with these non-host cities? They just don't know how to do it when they're in a global marketplace and they don't understand how to do business in the United States. So we're trying to make those connections. And that's really what Sports ETA is focusing on right now, is how do we educate both our members, but also internationally, of how they can do business and get better results in the United States.
I'm going to jump to that other poll. Actually, let's check out the results of the first poll, because I want to stick with the theme about how we can all generate more revenue as a DMO. Dan or Jasmine, are the results for that first poll up?
So for the first question, which sports experience that you have yet to have?
No, the other one. Oh, the other one. Can we do the what city makes you feel most at home?
Sure. All right. What city does the best job of making you feel like the event you're traveling to matters to the city from the day you arrived in town until the minute you left? The winner by just 2 percentage points is Indianapolis at the top, Orlando number 2, Fort Worth, Texas number 3, and St. Pete number 4, and the rest are all kind of around there, and I won't embarrass the city that's at the bottom.
Interesting. So I'm going to throw this to all of you. So Indy was number 1. Would you say Orlando was number 2, Dan?
Orlando number 2, Fort Worth number 3.
Okay. What's Orlando, Indy, and Fort Worth doing that other villages are not? And Janis, you're nodding. Start with you.
Yeah, well, look, they're creating an experience, an overall experience, right? And it starts with, the minute they land or drive into your city. And I think Indianapolis has been doing it for years. They do it well. Their signage is great. They think about getting to that visitor before they ever get into town, so the visitor knows what to expect. You got to look at the ease of getting in and out of a venue. Are they using technology to make those lines faster? Is parking easy? All of those things. And so when you get walkable cities or cities that are family friendly, like in Orlando, that makes sense, right?
I'll go, Amanda. So I made what I thought was the mistake of driving through Cooperstown last summer in move-in, move-out day, and I couldn't figure out, Cooperstown's a tiny little town, and it's not like there's, major interstates going through it, and I was just pleasantly stunned at the efficiency of the ingress and egress for I think it was a Thursday, whatever moving in, moving out day was. But so it's the same question over to you. What are other towns doing well that could be adopted by their competitors?
Yeah, I mean, Cooperstown for sure is a well-oiled machine, right? They understand that there's going to be thousands of youth baseball teams descending there every summer, and they're well planned for that type of volume coming in. I think some of the other folks that were on that list in terms of Orlando and Fort Worth, it's really about having strong DMOs and sports commissions that have a pulse on what's happening in the market. We've had the pleasure of working with both of those communities, and they know how to sort of roll out the red carpet and open the door for us of, the best hotel partners, the best attractions, knowing where to direct us. And it's because the people at the top of each of those organizations are so plugged in and well respected in those communities. And so I think it's really first starting to invest in the talent that you have at your DMOs and sports commissions to make sure that they're really part of that community and can guide rights holders like us who are, only coming in for a few events a year and might not know it as well as you do.
Yeah, Amanda, that's exactly where my mind went. And one of the things that, if you notice the top two in the poll, again, it's an anecdotal poll. We all know that, not scientific, but both of those top two destinations have an independent sports commission. And I think that's important to be noted. Now you look at Fort Worth, they operate very independently within their DMO. And again, you don't have to have an independent sports commission to be greatly successful. You have to have a commitment to sports tourism and be well-staffed and well-resourced. Every town that Amanda goes to, virtually the ones that she could look on a list and have her own, poll, she would tell you that there's a great commitment to sports tourism with great professionals that are there that are passionate and they're committed to it. And again, and that transcends youth and amateur. That's equally as important for professional sports or mega events and everything else. You look at Orlando, for example, and Jason Siegel and his team at the Greater Orlando Sports Commission, phenomenal organization. They're about to host the AAU Junior Volleyball Championships with 7,500 teams coming to their destinations. I mean that is unbelievable. And so, but truly, David, I think that the moral of the story is when you commit to sports tourism, and again, you can be a small market town. I think Amanda brought a great example with a small program there in Pigeon Forge or whatever that may be, and still play in this area and do great by your community. But you have to commit to it. You have to have staff dedicated to it. You have to have service staff dedicated to servicing the event, because in sports tourism, it goes well beyond, just hosting an event. It's that experience that we alluded to earlier that maximizes it, that plants that seed deep, that's going to grow and bring lifelong tourists to a destination.
So there's a question from the audience. Emmanuel Joan, which KPIs or post-session feedback tools are you using to measure accessibility satisfaction, and how do they close gaps identified? So what other KPIs and post-session feedback tools? Amanda, you mentioned your post-session earlier. What are the KPIs?
Yeah, I think more than anything, we're hyper-focused on that NPS. And so we look at that after every single event, but also look at trends across our calendar, our programming season at each of the different venues. For us, that's probably the most important KPI we have in the business, is because this is a word of mouth business. It's a repeat customer business. And so as much as those families enjoy the time that they have with us, that's going to spread like wildfire and get us into a good place for the following season. So that's our biggest area of focus, and we align the rest of our values against it. So employee performance, everything ladders up to NPS.
Dan, I'm going to jump over to that other poll. Again, this is we're all sports business folks, so all our friends think we get free tickets to everything, any sporting event at the drop of a hat. So I thought we'd throw this in just to see what, take a quick temperature. I'm going to dispute that, John. This is a highly scientific poll right here.
Highly scientific poll.
Sports travel executives
You couldn't ask for a better audience.
Yeah.
So, David, just to confirm, this is which sports experience that you have yet to have is at the top of your bucket list?
And the winners are?
The winner is nearly 50% of the audience has voted for Play Around at Augusta. So that by far is the number one. Number two and number three and number four really are pretty close. And frankly, number five, but we had attend a Hall of Fame induction ceremony, just nudging into the second spot. Drive a few laps on a motorsports track. Third, actually, they're tied now. Someone's been voting. And then fourth, drive a Zamboni with 11% of the votes. And then watching an inning from inside the Green Monster with 9%. Riding a Goodyear blimp at the bottom.
Wow, I thought blimp would be higher. That's funny.
Yeah, I'm shocked by that. People must be scared of heights.
Yeah.
John, you're going to have to include some of those experiences in your symposium so that the people get their bucket list checked off.
So I put that in. I mean, just obviously for a little anecdotal humor here, but going back to how do you incorporate the outside world? So if you're going to go to Augusta, the only thing you're going to do, right, is play there. You can go to a minor league game, and Augusta's a pretty short drive to a bunch of other major league markets and minor league markets. So, but how do you incorporate other experiences in your town? Indy or Phoenix or wherever, Houston. How do you incorporate other events? How closely are you working with your other teams, your other sports stakeholders in town to say, hey, we've got this coming up 16 months from now. We need your parking lot. Can we have your kiosk? How closely? I guess I'll throw that out there. How close?
Janis, I mean, you've hosted some of the biggest events there are. I mean, I'd love to hear your take on this and your experience at it because you live this.
Yeah, I think what was unusual in Houston is that our pro teams were all super friendly and gathered around the table often, right, to talk about things. Where a lot of times, if you have more than one pro team in a city, they're competitive and they think that, I got to protect my fans so they don't get stolen. But I think working together, that high tide, all the ships rise. And so working together is the key there. And then also, whether we were working on rugby or cricket, some of these, second and third tier sports in America, but that are really popular sports worldwide, we were always amazed at these communities that were part of the Houston citizenship, but like when 45,000 people showed up for cricket, I'm like, where did all these people come from? I had no idea. Or when we hosted table tennis and 30,000 tickets were sold. And so I think sometimes even in our own community, we're surprised by these pockets that maybe are kind of silent for some of our American sports, but when we bring international sports to them, how they just light up. And, even for me, knowing how diverse we were in Houston, I sometimes was still surprised. Squash, again, not a huge sport here in America. And lots of smaller cities could host it. We had 21 countries, and we did a youth international squash tournament. But it could have been hosted anywhere in America. And it just so happened that, that we had a group a very local prominent group that loved squash. And so they came to us, but had they not come to us, maybe I wouldn't have been thinking about that. So I think it's super important to always keep in mind that our mainstream sports are great, but there's also all these other sports that can be hosted in our professional sports stadiums or can be hosted in our minor league stadiums or in facilities in smaller towns that you don't have to be a big city.
Yeah, the cricket's a great example. And I'll go to you, Amanda. So you just had the big event in Canton. Like you said, it's not the biggest event Under Armour is going to have. It didn't have to be. I mean, that a lot of people, I know one of the competitors that played in Canton last weekend. And I mean, that's certainly a huge growth market. What other sports, and we'll start wrapping this up. We're at 40 minutes now. What other markets do you see, or what other sports, do you folks see, and this can be a question for all of you, growing so those DMOs can go out and say, hey, we can play squash in Wrigley Field. Amanda.
Yeah, I think there's, I hate to say it's a movement. This is always my pet peeve, but there's obviously a groundswell of support for women's sports. So I think in terms of not only flag football being a huge opportunity for girls to get involved in a sport they otherwise would not have, we see a lot of opportunity around softball. Softball is not sort of the little sister to baseball. There's a lot of people playing. A lot of communities already have that field, that asset, right? Because they can play on the same field that a youth baseball team can play on. And then obviously volleyball has been growing at the youth level to a tremendous extent over the last 5 to 10 years. But you see the continued investment in Love and other programmers on the youth volleyball side that I think that's just going to continue to explode.
Yeah, David, Amanda nailed it in terms of those growth opportunities. The women's sports are phenomenal right now. We're seeing, that women's flag football, women's wrestling, these other disciplines that are really showing great strength. Another really interesting trend is, we love to work with our partners at SFIA and look at some of their data on grassroots participation. First and foremost, grassroots participation is phenomenal. I mean, so that's the level below sports tourism, that's rec league. We're just getting involved in sports. Those numbers are growing every single year, which we love to see from our perspective, because then we know that gives us runway of about 5 years of great growth. The other fascinating trend was pre-pandemic, we saw individual sports really coming of age, doing very well, very, very popular. Team sports had shown kind of a dip. The pandemic totally transversed that. Individual sports somewhat flattened. Team sports, it just, it's been like a rocket ship. So, those are the important trends to notice. But most importantly, if you're in this business, we're in a great place because we've seen double-digit increases, in grassroots participation, double-digit increases in core participation. When we look at our sports tourism numbers, we had 11.5% growth rate, year over year on our last study. So we're in a great position, and there are a lot of sports that are emerging, that are exciting, that are great opportunities.
I'm gonna ask.
Yeah, and I think over the next decade. Oh, go ahead, David.
No,
Sorry, I was gonna say, if you look over the next decade, from my perspective, yes, do we have challenges with international travelers and the perception of us? Yes, but I look at it as a great opportunity because sports has always risen above politics, right? And so let's continue to do that. And that's my message when I'm out internationally is, yes, we understand there might be strains and different things going on, but we're sports and sports unites. It always has, it always will. And let's continue to do that. And so there's a lot of opportunity with youth sports in the international market.
Yeah, and to dovetail off that real quick, David, the other thing too, I think that we can't undervalue is the great promotion that's going to happen with World Cup, with Rugby World Cup, with the Winter Olympics coming. Everyone within the Olympic family and a lot of our NGB members, they know that post Olympics you typically have a great bump in membership. You're going to see great growth because you have this just organic advertising of the exposure of sports through these mega events. That's another thing that bodes so well for this industry.
And every market needs to measure that exposure over the next decade.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's a good way to end it right there.
Thank you all very much for doing this. It's been great. Thanks for the time. Thank you to the audience for taking the time. Thanks for completing our poll. And thank you for introducing yourself in the chat and saying hello. Amanda, John, and Janis, we couldn't do it without you. Thank you very much for giving us your time. David, well done. Thank you very much for doing this and putting this together. Next week, we are back with another episode of SBJ Live. This is the third episode in our series on how the sports industry uses artificial intelligence. This one will focus on AI-driven sponsorship, monetization, and marketing. You can register for that by going to sportsbusinessjournal.com and scrolling down to SBJ Live. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
See everyone in Augusta.
Bye.